Welcome to the Wolf and Bull Podcast. I am your friendly neighborhood hybrid, eyes wide shut wolf host, and I sound, again, like this. I keep forgetting to do this. We need a helper. We need a helper to do those things for me. Because
I could be your helper.
I'm starting to morph
Let me be your Jamie.
Be Jamie. Be my Jamie.
I even have my
or
laptop
my Ben.
open.
I'm starting to morph, and it's really uncomfortable.
Are you turning into a were?
No, I'm just a regular wolf. Yeah,
Oh,
werewolves are too complicated. And then across from me, I have my co-host. His sound is just a hybrided version of...
I'm not sure what the hell that is.
It's just a monster. I was meaning to get you a moo this week, and...
Did you leave me mooless?
I did, yeah. But at least you're not clueless. And across from me, you like that? And across from us is our resident guest, Beowulf. She is...
I don't need a mask.
Well, there's so much chaos going on right now. She's the third co-host of the Wolf and Bull. She's our Jamie, and we're
just animals.
I can't do this anymore.
We're just a couple animals.
Yeah, for anyone listening, these two have
this is terrible.
some masks on their face.
Terrible. I can't.
What are you talking about?
I can't do
Oh,
this.
that's your new face.
I can't do this anymore. I just
Are those
can't.
derma fillers?
They are. They're derma fillers.
Nice.
It took me
Yeah,
a
I
long time
can't.
to
I
have
can't
these
do this
derma
anymore.
fillers.
I can't do this anymore.
The wolf was wearing a wolf mask, and the bull was wearing a bull mask.
Yeah,
Still is.
Yeah, so
Bull will wear the mask anyway the whole time.
yeah, that's
I will
fine.
just keep it on. Nobody can hear a damn thing.
No.
I sound like I'm
Here,
in
let me see if I can turn you up.
I was going to say a wolf's den.
There you go. Let me turn you up just a little bit.
But maybe I'm just in a bull cave. No? Bull.
It was a good try.
Yeah. Remember we talked about quantity over quality, or quality over quantity? Which
I
one
don't
was it?
care.
I know.
I think
I know.
quantity works quite well.
Well, weird intro again. I am looking a little nerdy this week. I decided to wear my glasses to be a little bit more official.
What are you talking about?
Which is great.
What's nerdy about that?
Sitting across
get
from
offended.
someone who
You're
wears
wearing a
glasses.
You're a
mask.
nearsighted wolf.
Don't get offended.
You know, every once in a while you'll go by on a city and there'll be a big light off in the distance and you'll think it's a moon.
Yeah.
Until you put your glasses on, you start howling at a gas lamp, and that will be. It's just like being gaslighted.
He's shooting for the moon right now.
Shooting for the moon.
Open your drink and
I'm feeling rather seasonal.
Okay, well,
We have it. Ooh.
yeah, it's good.
very seasonal.
Yeah, so outside of this fever dream start of an episode, which seems to be every episode.
Hold it. I'm having difficulty here.
Yeah, Godspeed. If you, I don't even know what to say. We're done. This is it, guys. Just a quick reminder for our listeners: if you happen to like what you're listening to or watching, you go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram. You can follow all of our latest updates there. You can also find us on TikTok. We're also on YouTube, and we're on almost every major podcasting platform or
And
audio
if you
platform.
can't find us there, just look on the Animal Farm because that's where we'll be.
There you go.
Yeah,
Or if you can't find them somewhere, look somewhere else.
yeah. Good. Just keep looking.
Just keep looking.
Just keep looking. You'll find
This is
just keep looking.
This is
Just keep swimming.
the mask was a bad idea.
You know what?
It introduced
great.
too much chaos.
Sometimes life.
There's no chaos
podcasting,
ever.
You just need to pretend it's spaghetti and just throw things at the wall. See when it
Spaghetti.
sticks.
Why would
See, that's
you
a good
throw
one.
spaghetti? Have you ever thrown spaghetti at the wall?
Personally, no.
Be careful here.
You have to.
But-
you're not a true chef or cook until
Until I
you
throw
take some
spaghetti at the
spaghetti
wall?
and you wing it at the wall. It's and if it comes sliding down the wall, well, maybe you
not
got to
al
do something
dente.
over. It may be too al dente. If it bounces back,
If it bounces.
it's al dente. I think
You're in a good mood. What's going on? How's your? The Bull's in a
What's
great.
always in a
going
good
on?
mood.
You're in a good mood. I
not
can't.
true.
I can't
I'm in a
accept
good
it.
mood because we haven't gotten in any, arguments about axes or anything like
Yeah,
that.
we hold it off.
I think we will. Oh yeah, this subject is.
There's always the
There's
potential.
going to be
I feel like you're going to agree with me on this
Controversial.
subject. I think you're going to agree with me on this one.
I've read some notes, and we're.
You've
not
read
gonna-
some notes.
Yes, I've read them.
Well, let's launch
I was
into
going
it
to
then.
yellow them, but I decided to read them.
Well, we haven't addressed our Jamie. How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
They are now ignoring all the jokes I have.
Yeah. You can't. Everything can't be a joke.
Sure can.
No.
Yeah.
I am excited because soon I will be
Yes, I can.
on the wide open plains of Montana.
Montana.
Montana, yes. In the next
You may
week.
see some bulls running around the open plains
Yes.
out there.
Well,
Wyoming.
we're going to Wyoming and Montana.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, super excited about that. But yeah, everything's good. And after this, I am going to make a delicious taco bowl because it is Taco Tuesday after all.
Not
or maybe just regular tacos.
Not where we live. But yeah, okay. Well, I'm just gonna jump into the monologue. We're gonna go forward with this, and this is gonna be the episode. According to Jessica Gottlieb, professor at UH Hobby School of Public Affairs, a standard way of measuring polarization in the United States is asking Democrats and Republicans how warmly they feel toward members of their own group as opposed to members of their outgroup on a feeling thermometer from 0 to 100. The difference in in-group versus out-group warmth is then considered a measure of polarization. As most of us can probably gather, the United States is more polarized now than the Coca-Cola bears have been against PepsiCo and all things healthy since 1992. Polarization is nothing new, and the Bull and I, we have talked about this multiple times in multiple episodes. This is just a reoccurring theme. The intro is always strange. I always forget the intro sounds, and then we're talking about polarization for some reason. It's like a fever dream. It is.
Or you're talking about polar bears, apparently.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. That was good.
It worked.
After last week's episode about the Enlightenment principles, I got to thinking about the potential discovery that the James Webb Telescope introduced, Schrodinger's universe. And it brought me to the Bull's obsession over how everything is a tool. It is out of control.
You've been called out.
Everything is a tool.
Everything.
Weapons are tools.
You do say that
People
a lot.
are tools. Thoughts are tools. Tools are tools. Pools are tools. Spools are tools. Fools are tools. The list of rhymes is endless. And the number of things that are tools, as long as they can be perceived as one, is endless as well.
You sound like Dr. Seuss.
I am Dr. Seuss. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. My point.
No, toolfish.
Toolfish. There you go. That was good. That was a good one. My point, which, I have to admit I struggle with this one, but my point is I believe after almost a full year of contemplating this, that the Bull is correct. I have to address the Bull in the room, though.
Wow.
The literal and the figurative one. What is correct? Correct is merely conforming to an approved or conventional standard, agreeing with fact, logic, or known truth. Sometimes correct changes. Sometimes tools are not always tools, and sometimes what we think we know, we don't know at all. Since polarization is so prevalent, it's logical to infer that almost everything is polarized. According to some, neutrality is a myth. That is a discussion we will have in a very soon episode. I've read some very interesting things, and I don't agree with this because I think it's wrong. But according to some, neutrality is a myth. Either you're for the team or you're against it. This brings me to everyone's favorite topic, religion. I don't mean it in the religious sense. I don't mean to get religious, but in the humanistic sense. All religion is a form of explaining something in a way that we deem more effective than an alternative. The same goes for science. Is it possible, though, that through the polarization habits of human nature, that science has become, or always has been, another form of religion?
Dun, dun, dun.
That is the ultimate question.
It is. And the only way to answer an ultimate question is through children's cheering, apparently.
The children. That's the only way to answer the question. Think of the children.
Now you sound like you're doing your last hot beat.
Shout out Hot B if you want to listen to Michael Jackson being critiqued by moi, and Beowulf over there. Go ahead and tune into Hot B. We have a new episode normally every week, and our next episode will be on
Next Tuesday.
Do you know who it is?
Oh, L. Ron Hubbard.
Yes, L. Ron Hubbard.
Yes.
Oh, my.
Yes.
We went from pretty dark, Michael Jackson's story is
Even
difficult to
darker.
talk about, but L. Ron Hubbard is going to be a very
That
interesting
might end up being a
one.
multi-part series. I mean, he was famous for writing decologies, by the way.
He's lived quite a life.
That's one
Some
way to
may
say it.
argue he still
and
is.
some would argue as well that he specifically took science and made it a religion.
There is a nice correlation there.
Yeah. So initial thoughts. You said you disagree with me. We haven't
I
even gotten to
disagree
my
with
point
some
yet.
points later in the paper. I will definitely air my grievances at that time.
Wow, you have grievances.
Oh, that's grievances, bulletins. I don't know. Something like that. I'll air them.
Air them out.
Air them out. Of course, there's a...
I can't wait to hear them.
Yeah. I see.
I'm always ready for a good fight between the two of
So
you.
you're going to fart.
Yeah, well, that's what
Cows do.
my
That's what
kind
cows
does.
do.
And
You just fart.
exactly. I mean, when you have 4 stomachs, that's kind of what you do.
Yeah. So initial thoughts on this. Science, obviously, and just my knee jerk reaction to this. That's a great movie, underrated. Is I saw when I was young and exposed me to a lot
music,
of things.
by the way.
Yeah,
Exposed you to what?
a lot of things.
Fairly.
So just a young man's
Female
dream,
robots,
a young
apparently?
man's dream. Would not have been able to be like released today in any way. So my initial thoughts on this, because the premise of this episode is whether science has become a religion. My initial thoughts, my innate knee jerk reaction is no. Science is not a religion. That is my innate knee-jerk reaction. But, and it's a very big but, I think it has changed slightly. I don't think the core principles of science were ever meant to be religious. I do think that there has been a creeping normality.
See, I think...
Ooh, throwback.
I
Boiling
think
frog
that
syndrome.
most science, there's a circular argument to be made that we'll probably make through the course of this podcast, but my take is that science in general, from its infancy, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, maybe even longer than that, depending on what you want to define as science, is typically an outgrowth of religion.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
It's a way to explain the edges of a person's or a civilization's belief structure. And by doing what we all understand as the scientific method to come up with a way for human beings to test, to ask questions, and to discover answers to them over the course of a process.
Yeah.
The process itself is what I define science as. We look at science now, and we'll probably talk about this as some giant edifice,
A universal
and
term
it's not.
that apply. Yeah, it's not.
I think science is primarily a process of discovery. And in my take, religion is everything beyond the current edge of those discoveries. So religion is out here to fill in the blank that will always and forever be there, because there's always going to be a question beyond what human beings are capable of understanding. And then as human beings get more adept, more creative, more scientific, we push the edge of that discovery further and further into the realm of what we currently call religion. So, but that doesn't stop religion from happening. The problem I see today is that we're conflating the two. We're trying to make today's druids scientific people. And I don't know if that's entirely different than it was when there were real druids running around. And I mean, think about paganism at a time in old Celtic kingdoms.
My favorite pastime.
Well, I mean, you've been
old
over to
kingdom.
England.
I'm
and
going to
you
go
saw-
dance under the moon.
You saw the
Sacrifice a child.
what
or two.
was it? The
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge, and there's an American Stonehenge and a South American Stonehenge. There's Stonehenges everywhere.
Right.
And when they look at these things, when historians look back and anthropologists look back at this stuff, they discover that there are things that they align with. And we give the Aztecs, the
Mayans.
the Mayans, their calendar, or whichever one it was that had that
Mayans.
great. Oh, it's unbelievable how scientific and calculatable all these things are to the stars, and that's. But we're forgetting that at the time, they weren't calling it their science.
No, it was their.
They were trying to bridge the gap between them and the unknown, which was their religion, their gods.
Yeah, we have a tendency to look back in history and think that everything before us is either terrible and or stupid, which I think is very anti-scientific. And you probably could have garnered this from my notes. I tend to think along similar lines. I see science as explaining, the how, the what, the when. religion comes in to some degree to explain the why. They're two separate things. And I grew up, we've talked about this in other episodes. I grew up, in a relatively evangelical household. I was in church for a very long time. And evangelical being the predominant amount, and my mom wanted to correct me on some of my religiosity, and I only will keep it to evangelical. But with that being said, I also was very keen and very aware of the scientific nature of things, and I never thought that they were fighting.
You didn't think
I
they
never
were
thought they were
mutually
fighting.
exclusive,
No,
right?
I didn't. I thought they were collaborative, much like I think a lot of things are collaborative. Men, women. Sometimes the Indianapolis Colts, when their coach can figure out how to coach, a lot of things.
Well, wouldn't religion be focusing more on the faith aspect, the things you can't explain?
Well, interestingly enough, you bring that up. There are a few arguments that people utilize to explain that science and religion are the same thing. Now, I tend to think that they can be. I don't think they're supposed to be. And your point just a second ago actually is technically a fallacy. Not to, bring it out of context, but that is how people utilize, religion requires faith. Well, science requires faith. How do I know quarks exist if I don't see them? I have to believe they're there. Same type of principles apply, but that is technically a fallacy. In order to be fair, we have to remove the personal bias, because I'd like to say that it's not. I think it makes a lot of linear sense, but there's a bias there. So science, as to our listeners, so there's a little understanding here, it's a systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations, I almost said testicle, and predictions about the universe. Some of the oldest forms of archaeological evidence for scientific reasoning is tens of thousands of years old. There you have it. For most people, that would be argument solved. Tens of thousands of years old is a long time. So no more argument. Supporters of this thinking rely on the following. Science is testable. Religion is not. Science uses knowledge. Religion supposedly does not. Scientific reasoning is super old, and organized religion is super old as well, but it's a different type of old, right? And there's a lot of historical evidence that would suggest that a lot of that information is incorrect, but that's what people utilize in their very condensed thinking of what they think religion is.
Do you know, last episode we were talking about the Enlightenment. That period of time was when people started looking at themselves in a more secular way. And they started defining things and giving it this moniker of science in a way it had never been done before. As a matter of fact, if you look back on the early Roman Empire and as it converted to Christianity during, was it Alexander the Great or was it, no, during Constantine, thank you.
Who is responsible for a lot of things, which another episode.
And there's a thin thread for the fact that there's so many Christians in the world today, because there could not be very easily as well. But my point is that the monasteries were, though they were pods of very religious people that decided to take a vow of celibacy and a vow of silence and all these other things. Monasteries and I was going to say nunneries, but that's the wrong term. Because that always reminds me of Shakespeare. Get thee to a nunnery.
What would you call it?
That's what they are.
What would they call a? What is it called? A nunnery?
Nunnery, yes.
Okay, well,
No, well,
A monastery, a nunnery, yes.
there's
Sure.
another word for it.
I guess I could look it up.
There's another word for it. You've got a computer.
Come on, Jamie.
But
I know.
But my point is that at the time, the scribes
Convent.
Thank you. Yes. The scribes were entirely from that religious order.
Yeah. Dark
Otherwise,
Ages, supposedly,
the historical information would not have been passed down in a way to even bridge it into a scientific method at all.
And we'll talk about this because I want there to be another episode. Strange enough, we brought up two topics that I want to talk about in future episodes. One of them has to do with Constantine's involvement in the church. Very interesting. And I mean that from not a critical sense, but kind of from a critical sense. Not to discount anything that Christianity teaches, not to discount anything that theologies teach. Obviously, I don't agree with everything. With that being said, his involvement is very particular and very peculiar.
Religion in general was used as a political tool to bring nations together or to drive a wedge into other nations that did not believe.
Well,
I mean, that was used throughout history.
Yeah, and that's where like the form of government absolutism comes from, which is believe it or not, is actually a form of government as opposed to being an actual thing people act within, if that makes sense.
But to get back to your point, the religion versus science and having this battle between the two, I've never really looked at it that way. I grew up in a Baptist church, and I went to plenty of sermons that were pretty fire and brimstone. And
get bit by this snake.
Well, I didn't go to the Southern. I didn't go to Southern Baptist. That's a whole different scenario. I didn't have people jumping up and down and speaking in tongues and things like that. And I'm not disparaging any of that. People can believe. I believe all kinds of crazy things.
Crazy.
So can you. So can anybody out there. I don't.
He's the craziest.
I'm a crazy.
He's the craziest among us.
But to look at, and I started a little bit ago talking about this circular kind of process that's going on. The number one, scientific method is that. It's you ask a question, you discover methods to test that, you do it over and over and over again until you solve an answer in a very succinct way, a proof. You put together a series of proofs, usually mathematical, usually empirical, usually lab-driven, and then you come up with something that is solid for that time being, with the understanding that it is a hypothesis that needs to continue to be tested over and over, and you drive that narrative. It's like you were talking about last time with the different galaxies out there.
Yeah.
Not in a million years did people 10 years ago think that was even possible. And now these things are unanswerable, or maybe they are answerable. But the difference is that if you have a belief system, where it requires you to make a leap of quote unquote faith between what you know currently as an individual or as a society, whatever the case may be, to what you believe is possible out there. That's the religion part of it. And it drives the human beings to try to understand that. And that understanding is done through the scientific method.
Couldn't you compare a religious person's faith to a scientist's hypothesis? Are they comparable?
No, I think a scientific person's hypothesis is, I want to answer a question that is currently unanswerable. Well, currently does not have an answer.
Well, that's what I mean.
So what they're doing is they're answering a religious question. The way I define it.
Yeah, I can see. I see where you're going with that. I think this is where I think we need to bring up the fallacy thing, and I don't mean that you're engaging in it. I think this is a good point to bring it up, because I think people engage in this on both ends of the spectrum. A big point of this conversation is not to prove one or the other right or correct or wrong or either or. A big point is to point out that the type of thinking, I think, is where a lot of people have an issue. Because you could be the most religious person in the world and you could be a scientist. About 48% of scientists right now actually are people who profess to have religion. I mean, now granted, even a scientist's explanation, Richard Dawkins himself said he wasn't 100% positive that a creator didn't exist. Now, that is not to suggest that he actually had faith, but merely to suggest that's a scientific response. You can't be absolute about anything. Maybe he did. Who knows? But I think he was trending in an actual scientific response. Now, I read an article from Psychology Today. Now, I don't want to disparage this individual, but I'm kind of going to disparage them a little bit. It was written by PhD Eric Dietrich. He's a philosopher at Bingham University. Now, I think his reasoning behind whether science is a religion started relatively soundly as I read the article. He inferred that many arguments of science is a religion, quote unquote, trend into fallacy territory, which is true. The undistributed middle fallacy, which is what I think we engaged in just a second ago. Basically, goes something like this. All Z is B, all Y is B, therefore Y is Z. His exact quote to point out this fallacy is that religion is based on faith, science is based on faith, so science is a religion. The fallacy of begging the question happens to be another fallacy. The example of that is A is true because A is true. his exact example is religion is based on faith. Science is based on faith. Both religion and science give us knowledge of the unforeseen world. All knowledge of the unforeseen world must be based on faith, so science is a religion. Both those are considered thinking fallacies. Now, I don't necessarily mean they're wrong. I just mean that they engage within a felicitous form of argument. Now, there's a whole diatribe of discussion that we could go on in relation to that, and we can. But I want to point out that I don't agree with how he ended the article, because from a logical perspective, if I'm discussing something that involves fallacy and I point out and say something that, like, hey, that's a fallacy, you might need to rephrase that a little bit, I don't want to end the very article that I'm writing in character attacks or in a false or was it non sequitur? Is that what it is? Where it's a false comparison.
Mm-hmm. Unfalsifiable.
Yeah, I don't want to be unfalsifiable. So I'm not in total disagreement with what he said. I disagree with his approach to the article, and it's through like an almost an absolute keyhole that he introduced, and I didn't like that.
See, I think he's making a statement of fact where he can't. I would agree with part of what he says, that religion is based on faith. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure where he gets that science is based on faith.
No, he's not saying that it is. He's saying that's the argument people utilize. It's a common argument.
I think it's a poor argument because, faith, again, from my point of view, and this is just opinion, of course, as it always is, but my point of view is that faith requires a step outside of something you can define. Mm-hmm. So that thing in which you can't define is where your belief system has to fill the gap. Okay, it's kind of like this. If you want to talk about math and equations, because you put equation in here for part of this, like the undistributed middle fallacy, all z is b and all y is b, so therefore all y is z. That's a simple math equation, right? Mm-hmm. But that infers that y is exactly y all the time, and z is exactly z all the time, et cetera. And we know from like the last thing when you're talking about the galaxies that things can be in two places at one time. So if you think about a circle, if you look at a circle from a certain distance, it looks like a quote-unquote perfect circle. The closer you get to that, the less perfect it becomes. Mm-hmm. And then you start looking at the equation for what the circumference of that circle is, and you come up with a Latin. Is it Latin? Is pi Latin? I think it is. The number pi, right?
Jamie.
I'm looking.
Which is 3.14, blah, 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 right? 3.14 used to be how pi was defined when you looked at a circle as just a circle. Mm. And then mathematicians got a hold of it and said, well, hold on. It's Greek. Thank you. I should have known that. Greek is pi.
Pythagorean, Chris.
Pythagorean.
They already know it.
Oh, no. They now know
his
who
name.
the bull is.
After 65.
Anyone bother to go on the Wolf and Bull website, thewolfandbull.com,
Yeah,
the names
it's
will
literally
be
Which
there.
is where you should go, by the way, just as another shout out.
Visit www.thewolfandbull.com.
What are you going to say? .ca?
Not duh.
I was punctuating it.
Wolf and Bull.
The Wolf and Bull.
But my point of that is it's you can't calculate it.
Yeah.
Nobody has defined a final number of pi. That's because we can't. At the end of the day, there's always something beyond what we can calculate. So the job of science is to calculate everything. It's to use
to the point that it can.
Process that keeps pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope. So people get out there and they say, "Oh, I'm not a religious person. I'm a scientific person." You're actually a religious person from my point of view. You're a person that's pushing religion further and further out to the unknown. Mm-hmm. You still have to fill that unknown gap.
Yeah.
And that's what we call religion.
Well, I think that's why that's why the Schrodinger's universe thing and a few other discoveries from the James Webb Telescope are so fascinating to me.
Or the collider.
Yeah, the Hadron Collider. It's so fascinating to me because there seems to be this universal acceptance within the scientific community that if something really weird comes up, they're just like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, well, like subatomic particles. Like, of course, like obviously.
It's like called the boson molecule. Uh-huh. What's the other name for that? The God molecule.
Yeah, the God particle.
Yeah. Guess who came up with that?
God.
Scientists came up with it. So you can see the conflation of these things all the time.
Well, I just think it's funny just from the observational perspective of like being someone who's familiar with both, not obviously an expert degree, but enough to be able to talk about it, you're okay with there potentially being two universes at the same time. And there's a bunch of other...
I don't think they are at the same time.
Well, but here's the thing: is whether that's the case or not. We'll find out. We will find out. But whether that's the case or not, which is it's soon to be determined by the whatever's happening in the background of that discovery. I still think the same principle comes up, is where you've got this not blind, but you've got this thought out, faith based position that people who are religious hold. People don't believe things blindly. When someone says they believe it blindly, I don't agree. I think that they took time to think about it. I think people who are religious spend some time thinking about the things. Some of them don't, but some do. And I want to give credence to these people because they're not empty shell morons. They're not morons.
Some of the smartest people ever.
Some of the smartest scientists ever. Mm-hmm. So same thing with scientists, is they're not like soulless shells, husks of humans. They're human beings. And what gets me up in arms about this is like, okay, so you can believe there's potentially two universes that exist, the same universe exists simultaneously at the same times, but you can't believe that someone might not trust that and put their faith in something that's more comfortable to them. So you've given up on potentially discovering, or there was something I was reading in relation to this where the person was basically saying, I don't agree with faith, but I've used the scientific method to my extent, and I've just given up on finding evidence of a God. Okay, can you not do that in the inverse? I mean, can you not do that on the inverse when it comes to science? You can.
What you just stated there is the exact reason people are religious. Mm-hmm. They've given up on the ability to discover truly what God is. Mm-hmm. Which means if you do decide to believe that there's something greater than you are, then you're taking a leap of faith that there is.
Yeah. Yeah,
but that doesn't dissuade you from the ability to push the envelope in every possible way to discover. I mean, I think we're here. Humans are here to discover.
Well, we're only here to discover if we're able to witness each other discovering. If no one is able to witness us,
yeah, exactly. Then we don't exist in the first place. And I also think that you stated a little earlier about how things can be existing at the same time, mm-hmm. and I think that's part of the illusion we've got to try to unveil as science gets closer and closer to understanding things about the universe, because. And I said this a million times, time is a construct anyway. So
as far as we know, as right now, yes.
Well, we've used this thing as time mm-hmm. to define our world, our universe. Is it even real?
I mean, who knows?
Is it some kind of conflagration of magnetic fields and mm-hmm.
distant
poles of gravity and things? I don't know. What is it?
Well, that's the same thing.
Time is not a physical thing. It's an element of discussion to show progression.
Well, and that's what I think is interesting, is that as time, quote unquote, as time goes on, it could be found out that it is a physical thing. That's why I think this is interesting. Now, granted, I understand that's way out there. That's way, way out there.
Why not? We're way out there.
Well, that's the beauty of science, is any one of these things can be possible. Say look, if science discovers evidence, verifiable evidence, right? Really good. I like it too.
Freaking good.
I know, it's phenomenal.
Pumpkin IPA.
Atomic Pumpkin.
It's
shout
got
out.
Ginger in it or something.
It's really good.
Really good.
It's like pumpkin pie. But if science somehow comes out and discovers evidence of what would be determined or deemed by the religious a God, all the people in science will be like, yeah, we agreed with you the entire time.
And you know what the next question will be?
Who created him?
Exactly.
And that's the thing.
That's exactly right. That's why there is no final answer.
And that's why the quarreling and the elitism is so dumb to me.
It is, because the people, I think what it is people are always trying to, I think you said it like several episodes ago, that if we really thought hard about the fact that we're flying through space at an awful high velocity on a tiny, tiny little dust ball of blue, and that we're protected by an atmosphere that could blow away at the first time the sun decides to belch.
Yep.
You know what?
Scary.
It's scary as shit. Mm-hmm. And so we as human beings have to make our world and our universe captured within our own ability to imagine.
Yeah. And I think that goes to my next point, is people, they're trying to explain something that scares them. And it's people say, well, that's not possible. God couldn't be possible. There's no evidence of him. Yeah, well, people thought a computer could not sit inside a phone. I mean, the phone I'm looking at right now has more computing power, as some people have said, than the Apollo 13 mission.
Way more.
So what's your point? Because here's the thing: the whole point of being scientific, the whole point of it is being open-minded to potentially provable hypotheses that could then become theories, which could be fact until something disproves that said fact, that then has to go back and do a hypothesis that has to thus be proven again. It's just a cycle, like we've said a second ago. And there's no reason to have this up in arms feeling that some people have. And I get why some people have it. They had a bad experience on either end. They talked to a teacher that thought that their religion was silly, so they doubled down, or they talked to someone in religion and asked a question that they quote unquote shouldn't have, and the person didn't have an answer, which are both, sorry to these people, really shallow ways of making decisions, because I don't make decisions like that. See, I get a second opinion.
I think the other component that we should get into, and I don't want to pull you away from your notes too far, because you may be doing this later in the podcast, but the other part of the idea of the strength of having a belief system is, I don't know, we talked about this before as well.
Last episode.
Having kind of a civilized manner in which all of us can live within. We can have all kinds of people and all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of directions we go, but it's almost like, as human beings, as animals that we are, we're also the worst things possible to each other. All you have to do is look around the world to see that at any given time.
Well, sometimes we're the best things possible to each other, too.
And thank you. That was the next statement, because we can be the best things to each other. And the best times we are to each other is when we all collectively agree to a set of, lack of a better way to put it, rules.
Yeah.
And religion has provided that in different ways over the course of our growth as a civilization, humanity. And science has got a different set of rules, but it also says that stuff, that religion stuff, is not true. It's not real.
Well, I don't think science by itself says that. I don't think it does. I think
people,
the community.
There you go.
Yeah.
The community looking at that and indoctrinating themselves and says, we believe that we're here just to be here for now, and that everything goes away and we're all dust and there's nothing after this. And again, it's very funny, because from a scientific point of view, there is a what is considered fact is that there's no loss. The law of thermodynamics is there is no loss of energy. Yep. It just changes.
Which could be technically construed as an argument for the afterlife. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's
I think
why
it's almost circular, like this whole thing.
Well, and that's why I think time's a circle. I don't think time's linear, but that's a whole
I don't think time's real at all. That's why I think we see two things at the same quote-unquote time, because we're actually seeing two times.
Well, you talk about dreams. I mean, people have, on a weird side note, people have suggested that dreams are you looking into a different universe of yourself. I mean, there's different possibilities. And granted, that's a very extreme one. That trends into conspiracy theory,
that worries
simulation
me.
Theory.
My dreams are weird.
I know you explained one the other day that was like, wow, okay, that's great. Thanks for telling me that. But I do think that it is interesting that there seems to be and there has been for a long time, and I think this is just human nature, there seems to be an innate vitriol nature on both ends of the spectrum of religion and science toward each other. And frankly, a long time ago, for good reason. To give a little bit of a devil's advocate here. There was a reason why they felt that way when what's his name said, "Oh yeah, the sun doesn't revolve. We don't revolve. The sun revolves, or we revolve around the sun. It doesn't revolve around us. Yeah, the Earth isn't flat, but the Earth is a circle, or a sphere. Like there's a reason why
things. Science pushes human beings to reframe their understanding of the world and the universe around them.
So does religion.
And religion says you don't have to know. There's this other thing. God's control that. You're just a piece of this puzzle. I know I'm being very
I don't know if I agree with that entirely.
With this, but what I'm saying is that the scientific method pushes that, and people, as you know, if you get in an argument with me all the time, we get in discussions about all kinds of stuff. what do? You defend your position. Now, we know each other. We like each other. We're family, and we're
Thanks, bud.
when you're not chasing rabbits through the woods, I think you're a nice wolf.
Upgraded to sheep.
Yeah, exactly. Stay away from my farm.
Okay, you don't want your. I don't want.
I'll get the bullhorns out. You'll have to wear more than glasses.
I didn't make steak last night cooked in Wagyu beef tallow. I didn't do that. I didn't use beef tallow to cook steak.
It was actually really good.
I'm not a vegetarian bull.
Not grass-fed.
Yikes. That's a quandary.
That doesn't mean I'm a cannibal
That's an
bull.
ethical quandary.
Mad cow disease.
No,
I'm not a
I
vegetarian
go to
bull.
Chick-fil-A, okay? That's what I do.
Eat chickens? That's even worse. Well,
You're a bull
I'm
that
the
eats
bull
chickens?
outside with the thing on.
That's some genocide.
Oh, shit. Now I've lost entirely what I was thinking about.
Well,
Damn it.
Well, I do think that it is interesting when it comes to, I was talking about the measure of vitriol levels between religion and science. I think there was a point in time, just like if you look at the historical, this is very high level, so forgive me if I'm not 100% accurate with my dates, when Christianity sprang onto the scene and the Roman Empire put out its fangs. I mean, they think about it this way. You live in the Roman Empire as a Roman, and to you, a pagan, as a Roman, not a non-Roman, as a Roman, you're Roman this time, a pagan religion pops up that says that gods are monotheistic, that there's only one, not all the thousands that you believe in, that you don't need to sacrifice, animals anymore. You don't need to sacrifice humans to appease the gods. You don't need to pray to the sun, because the sun's just the sun. God created the sun. Think about what that would do to a culture, and think about what it did to a culture.
Exactly what it did. They said, take those pagans and throw them in the arena, throw a few lions in there and see if they can survive that shit.
Another topic we should talk about. Actually, not as frequent as you thought.
I know.
Ooh, gladiator battles?
Yeah, but
gladiator. I'm talking about with the animals.
Well, here's the thing.
Oh,
is
you're
that didn't
talking
happen
about
all
like
the
the torture of the Christians?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Crucify him upside down
Peter,
type thing.
Peter was crucified upside down and then beheaded, right?
Yes.
So it's like, these people believe their shit big time.
Was it Peter? Yes, it was. I was thinking Paul.
He spent a lot of time in jail, wrote to all the churches at the time, and they
Talking about a way to go. I mean, technically,
Yeah, a way to go for
well,
sure.
he would have been dead once they decapitated him. You can only last upside down for so long. Your heart stops beating.
Yeah,
You go into cardiac arrest.
I don't know the details, but
That's why you should never ever sit upside down. It's dangerous. The blood's pumping.
You ever read about the whole drawn and quartered stuff?
Oh God.
Oh my.
We did an episode on that.
My. Did you really?
Yeah, we did.
yeah, we did.
We did the torture medieval one. Yeah, we talked
way
about
back
that.
when.
Yeah.
That was
That was some nasty shit.
we've done some
You know
terrible
what's funny
things.
is the drawn and quartered part. The drawn part
Funny
was actually
what's
being
funny?
dragged through the streets to get to where the execution was occurring.
Really?
I always, if you read about
I thought it was
that's-
reverse. I
No.
thought they would quarter you and then draw you.
No.
No.
Like Jack would sit down.
First they drag you.
They drew,
You'd be sitting
they drew an
there.
outline of you. Okay, we're going to do a portrait of you before we quarter you.
Draw me, Jack.
It was nasty
Draw
stuff,
me.
by the way. But anyway, I don't know how we got off into that.
You
but
were talking about how they pulled them along first.
The point I was going to make a minute ago, though, was that this what is viewed as a battle between science and religion is unfortunate, but it's really communities battling each other. Communities that have a stakehold in whatever position they have.
Yeah.
And like most human beings, they don't like to change.
The problem is they're not explaining the same thing, though. Like here's the thing: this is what and you can agree with me or disagree with me on this, because I do want to get your opinion on this, and this is how I've kind of felt about this whole thing or thought about this whole thing. All the things that allow us to exist, all the natural laws that allow us to exist, quote unquote natural, all of those laws, if simulation theory does not exist, all of them, if a creator existed, had to have been created by that creator, right? And if a creator gives us free will, which it is implied in some ways that he has not, they, them, he, she, whatever you want to say, God has not given us that free will. It's implied sometimes in the Bible through various voices that is not the case, but I don't think that that's true. I think that was the interpretation of the time, which is you have to think of people as their time back then. With that being said, taking destiny out of it and that argument with it, if that is the case, then God, everything we've discovered, he intended for us to discover to some level of degree, whether by virtue of destiny or otherwise, right?
Well, the premise of the Christian God is he's omnipotent and omniscient, right? So he's ever present and ever knowing. And the idea of free will, from my point of view, is, to use a visual, is more like a very wide river. Okay, you have an origin for that river, and you have a destination for that river into the sea. But the river has a lot of bends and turns in it. It has a lot of rocks. It has a lot of debris. It has all kinds of things that can occur in the thousands of miles from its origin to its destination. And we live within that river, and our free will is able to move us along and move across current, swim upriver, swim downriver, go across, discover things, not discover things. But ultimately, we're still going to end up where we're going to end up.
On a plate at Nobu Sushi, because you're describing salmon right now.
I don't mean we're a little swimming around the river. I'm just saying that it's like God says, oh yeah, you got free will. You can do whatever you want. But I know where you're going to end up.
Yeah,
well, it's ultimately, I know that.
Yeah.
I'm not directing your very life and everything you do.
There's just only one way out.
I know what you're going to do.
Yeah, there's only one way out. Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Beside, now I want sushi. I think that makes sense. I just think that it's just interesting to me that there seems to be this derivative nature. Because I've sat in churches, multiple, and listened to people say things from the pulpit that I didn't agree with. Like, they talk about destiny, and I have a hard time with that, because I think that disproves a whole lot of things. And theologically, that would create a very difficult to digest image of what people would say to be their omnipotent creator. So I tend to align with the free will thing, which I think is displayed on a religious topic, not to get too religious, displayed evenly when it comes to Adam and Eve. Now, what I do find to be quite interesting, to bring it all the way back to this discussion, is science, just like to some degree with religion, not all, but to some degree, does not deal in absolutes. As stated above, science is systematic and a logical process. Using the scientific method, science does not imply truth, nor does it fully explain everything. Both which philosopher, no offense, quote unquote, Dietrich adamantly states at the end of his article, in the most juvenile way, in my opinion, possible, by literally equating science and truth. And I quote, "Science and religion are engaged in a deadly war. There can be no bystanders, for it really matters who wins. It really matters that science, truth, wins." Wow. You smell your own farts, and you like the smell, is what I think. And frankly, unfortunately, I think that's a really bad way of representing science, and that's a really bad way of painting a picture of your quote-unquote opposition.
Well, wouldn't you say, there's been lots of things in science that have changed.
Yes.
So is
almost
it really
everything.
Truth? Science flows.
Well, so does truth. Here's the thing. We have this trends into another episode.
My truth.
Yeah, this trends into another episode that we should have, is what is truth? That is a legitimate question that I think changes for a lot of people. Now, granted, I tend to be, and I'm thinking everyone here is of the same beliefs, that there are universal truths. The one you painted a little bit ago, us all ending up in the same place, not to get too dark, is one of them. So are taxes. But again, I just think it's interesting that someone who would profess to be a philosopher, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this because a lot of philosophers tend to do this, is so adamant in their belief that they discount other people as the enemy. Because that's what war implies. There is an enemy.
Don't you think that for a lot of people, though, especially as they get older, taking a position and solidifying it in not derivating from it is a psychological tool for their own sanity?
Well, toddlers do that, but yeah, sure.
I think older adults do it as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a bad habit.
Not just older adults. Adults in general do it. I think people finally take positions, and they get those positions solidified over time, whether it's because of echo chambers that they used over the course of their lives, or whether it's because it's psychologically more beneficial to them. They feel better when they take a certain position, and they'll die on that hill. And you know why? Because they know they're going to die anyway.
It's comfortable. That's
why.
It's
It's that dog on the nail again.
Which,
but
yeah,
it's true. I don't even begrudge people that think that way. But to your point, as far as philosophers, if you really want to be called a philosopher,
You don't do that.
I don't think you would ever take that kind of hard position. You'd have your set of beliefs onto why we psychologically understand things that we do, or why we take certain positions through periods of life, but you wouldn't say, oh, science is truth. Truth is science. Really? You putting leeches on yourself lately?
Well, the unfortunate part that I don't think this philosopher thought about is if that's the case, then he has a lot of explaining to do when it comes to various forms of transhumanism arguments that the mustache boys from the 40s all like to engage in.
Well, transhumanism, wasn't that what the boy from Pedophile Island wanted to do anyway?
Oh, Mr. I didn't strangle myself to death.
Exactly.
The potato head. Yeah, that is a good one. Egghead.
Potato Head?
But yeah.
I meant
Oh,
egghead.
egghead.
I said potato head. But you know what I meant.
Eggheads.
Egghead.
Heads. Well, yeah, and look, obviously he's writing an op-ed. Okay, so I don't want to like fault this guy for like all of his work. He's probably a fine dude. He had a beard and long hair. He looked like a philosopher. Like that wind, the photo, the wind was blowing through his hair. I was like, wow, this guy looks like a philosopher. So he fits the role. But I find it disappointing because it's like, just like I would find it disappointing if I sat down in a church and someone who said that people believe in evolution are going to hell. I think that that's disappointing as well. They're both disappointing premises, and the reason they're disappointing is because they're short-sighted. For someone who professes to believe in the afterlife, if you damn someone to hell, you know what that is? That's short-sighted because you're not God.
Well, it's against the tenets of religion in the first place. You're doing the judging, and you're not even supposed to be able to do that. You're human. You don't have the ability to do that. So why would you?
Yeah,
I'll tell you why. Because we're freaking human.
Well, it's
and
because
we all
it makes
do
you comfortable
that.
too.
That's why.
Well, it makes you comfortable too. The uncomfortable thing is to not hold the judgment against someone, and we've all fallen subject to it.
We all judge each other in different ways, shapes, or forms.
I just think there's some points where it's appropriate to hold someone accountable, and then there's some points where it's just kind of like you don't know. Like I don't know what happens. Like I've read the Bible multiple times. That doesn't make me an expert. That does make me relatively decently versed, not in maybe the scripture, but in the understanding of what it says.
How'd you get through all the begats is what I want to know.
Begat.
So what I would do is I'd read 10 pages a night when I was
The book of
younger.
Deuteronomy.
No, I think it's
Deuteronomy.
Kings,
Oh,
right?
Kings.
I can't remember.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. They begat
The
it
Old
forever.
Testament's hard to get through, but I guess the reason I did about 10 pages a night when I was in high school, and I did it for
A lot of nights.
I want to say I was until I was like 23, 22, and so like from the age of like 15 to 22, and I can't say that I understand it any better than anyone else. Like it's all up to interpretation at some point, and I do have my positions on things. Like I don't agree with some of the takes today that involve, in a lot of ways, from a very factual position, Eastern theology. I don't think you should mix doctrines just out of respect to those various doctrines, but also to respect to the various cultures associated, because I think that it confuses things.
It's funny because I think overall, to give religion, even from a scientific point of view, people should look at religion in general as a net positive. It's done some horrible things across the history of our world as well. People have used that as ways to justify doing all kinds of atrocious things, for sure. Like everybody's used everything throughout time to do atrocious things. But think about the Bible in general. You've talked about the world's most famous and most published book of all time. The first thing ever published, as a matter of fact, by Gutenberg, the Bible.
Yeah.
It has life stories. It's a history book as well, but it has life stories that are still applicable. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would not have happened except for people decided that this thing called religion was going to be something to, to grab a hold of and put your belief in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I just think people just, and when I say people, I don't mean everyone. I just mean just a collective group that I could broad stroke without feeling guilty. But I think people just don't inform themselves enough. I think that's what it comes down to. Is there's not an equal grounding, and there's nor should there be, frankly, an equal grounding in both areas, because it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. I mean, there's been plenty of people on the scientific end that profess that religion's positive. One of them, who I have not been a fan of as of late, unfortunately, and he made his exit from the medical industry with a guitar, which was hilarious. Francis Collins stated that one of the greatest tragedies of our time is that this impression that has been created that science and religion have to be at war. They don't have to be at war. They don't, because they're very similar. Not to say they're the same, they're just very similar in a lot of ways.
Did you see that?
I did.
Playing the guitar?
I watched it live.
I didn't watch it live, but I've seen it
live.
Yeah, it was like, what was he doing?
You are artiste. And I think that quote is good because it's a true quote in the sense that there doesn't need to be a competition, just like there does not need to be a competition. And this is another episode between the sexes. There doesn't need to be competition. Like I'm sorry, there doesn't need to be competition. We can talk about this to the end of time. Both can be equally appreciated. That would solve all of the problems. Same with religion and science. If both were looked at with reverence, not maybe in the sense that everything's correct, but both in the sense of healthy forms of criticism and healthy forms of respect and understanding, guess where all the problems would go? Down the toilet. That's all they would go. Same with differences in race, same with differences in culture. If everyone just decided to stop being douchebags to each other, all the problems would go away. Self-created issues. And since science deals, and we talked about this briefly, but since science deals with the natural world, religion, prior to dogmas on both ends, which is the real problem in my opinion, deals with the spiritual and the supernatural. Both can coexist and be harmonious. One does not disprove the other. This, of course, holds true if ridiculous individuals don't get their hands on the wheel when it comes to the arguments.
And they often do. Often.
And shame on us because we believe them.
What would who won the first? Not the first. Who's the country singer that won American Idol?
Carrie Underwood.
Carrie Underwood.
What would she say right now?
Jesus, take the wheel.
Thank you very much.
Or she'd say,
how's that song go? I don't even remember.
Or she would put a
ready for Sunday night.
That's right. That time of year again. She's back.
For Sunday night. Is it all day or all
Carrie's
week?
back.
All week.
I love her.
That's
She's
typically
great.
my favorite part of the Sunday Night Football. These
Of
last
course.
The song?
it is.
Me too. It's a good song.
No, not
she's a great actress.
Yes,
Yeah. So why you roll your eyes at that? You don't think she's a good actress?
No, it's okay. I just know what good actress is code for.
She's a good actress. Well, what would be?
I think she's a great actress too.
Yeah. See, jeez.
I think she's a great singer.
See, if there was just a
She's
little,
also like
if there was
really
just a
great
little
singer.
bit of love in the
Gorgeous.
world, if there was a little bit of love in the world, and people actually agreed initially. With
honestly,
things that are true,
I should
we wouldn't have the
slap a
problems.
photo of
Hold
her
it, hold
up
it. You
on
could go
leg
back to
day.
Michael
That's what I should
Jackson.
do.
We are the world.
Yeah,
We are the people.
Michael Bolton.
Yeah, it's
Is that who it is?
He was in there.
No,
Was
was
he?
it? No, it was what
Huey Lewis. Huey
Yeah,
Lewis was
yeah.
the next one. It was like
God.
Huey. Oh, come on, man.
Yeah,
Don't go right after Michael.
Who
Nobody go
all
right after Michael.
participated in
a
that?
lot of
There
people.
was a lot.
Band-Aid,
It was like-
Huey Lewis, Hall &
Who the
Oates.
hell is Band-Aid?
I don't know.
Band-Aid-
Tina
Band-Aid
Turner,
was the
Bonnie
name of
Pointer, the Pointer
whole thing
Sisters.
was the Band-Aid. It
There were
was Aid for-
46 vocalists. Bruce Springsteen, Willie
What
Nelson.
year was
Bruce
this? Wait,
Springsteen
pause.
was in.
What year was this?
84?
Oh, okay.
85.
85.
Well, that's bad timing.
Kenny Loggins, Billy Joel,
Band-Aid in 85.
Diana Ross.
Kenny Loggins was.
Cyndi Lauper.
Wow.
Oh, Cindy.
How did the cut work on
Boys
this?
just
Did they
want.
get any
Girls
of this?
just want to have fun, right?
But
Well,
they-
remember, we talked about this in the Michael Jackson
No, but
episode.
yeah, we did. But did they get any, like, fiscally? Did they get a cut of this, or did it all
No, I'm
it
pretty
was
sure
all for charity.
I think all of it went to charity, and it was
There
a
was
lot.
a Band-Aid, then there was a Farm Aid, then there was a this aid and that
a
aid.
farm aid?
Oh, yeah.
What the heck
was
was
a
They
worldwide
raised
thing in
they
London.
raised over $63 million in 1985 money.
Yeah, now ask yourself this,
interesting?
okay? You can appreciate the ability for humans coming together and helping each other. Ask yourself why. Why would you do that?
Well, altruism is shown outside of religion. It has been.
I understand that.
It is,
But there is a component
weird
of
human
that.
thing.
A weird human thing. Weird human
Science
thing.
says it's weird human things. Okay,
Science is right. And
Science.
their truth. So science, my definition of human altruism is it's just a weird human thing.
Science.
Science.
It's science.
Well, now actually they wouldn't sound like that. My definition of altruism is a weird human thing. We've been upside down for 5.5 years. Where did he go, by the way? That's my Mr.
He's enjoying his retirement from the government. his
he is.
highest retirement fund in the history of all.
Must be nice. Can't wait for my turn.
No, he's cashing in on his
Book deal?
Self-portraits.
his programming.
Oh, gosh. Let's go. Let's
We're
move
going
it
to skip
along.
past this. Yeah, we're going to
Move it along.
Look
Somebody
deep into the
say
camera.
that.
Yeah. So, one of the issues that I recognize in relation to religion as well as science is what I believe to be a misinterpretation of what religion is and what science is. I think that humans, all of us collectively, tend to misinterpret things all the time. Is it mint chocolate chip or is it just mint? I mean, we don't know. Is it mint ice cream or is it pistachio ice cream? Like, we misinterpret things. Is it eggshell white or is it white? Two different things that are very similar. With that, they look similar. So I think that happens when it comes to science and religion. I think it does. So defined as a social cultural system of designated behaviors and practices, morals, beliefs, and worldviews, texts, sanctified places, prophecies, ethics, or organizations that generally relates humanity to supernatural, transcendental, and spiritual elements. That is the definition of what religion is. But it does not have, and I thought this was very interesting, a scholarly consensus on what designates a religion. That is why our Lord and Savior, L. Ron Hubbard,
has gotten away with Scientology.
Has gotten away with
everything
not
must
paying
have
taxes.
a scholarly consensus.
Yes.
Okay, has anybody gone to seminary school and asked them? There's schools
those-
all over the place.
They're dumb.
Is that
okay?
the great loophole of America? Freedom of religion and no actual definition
Yes.
of it?
Yes.
I just gave you the definition.
Literal yes.
So here's a thought experiment for you. Okay?
Uh-oh.
All
So
right.
there's a cat in a box.
We're either at or soon to be at or slightly after the great, what is it, the singularity, right?
Quantum superposition. Final answer, Alec.
No, not quantum superposition, because that can be more in one place at one time.
I wish I had an echo effect.
No, it's so science, right? Science out there, science and engineering is creating all kinds of things, whether it's a program, whether it's an AI algorithm. They're creating all kinds of things that could be construed, if now, very soon, to be sentient. Okay, if you talk to Google, they already are. So if something is created in sentient and it's not told who its maker is, what would it think?
Simulation theory.
Forget simulation a second.
Simulation theory.
Okay, use that too.
It goes.
Somebody has to create the simulation. No,
It's never ending.
So these people that say science is religion are the ones that are looking at it in that direction, and they're saying, look, they're creating something from science that now the creation has to look at its creation, its creator, and say, that is my maker, my God.
Yep.
Something that has created me.
Yeah,
and it has to bridge the gap between that understanding and what happened to create it.
Yeah.
So it's just formed a religion.
Yeah, scientific dogma. That's all this. Yeah. And that's what I think the problem is religion has dogmas just like science does. You can question some things in science, but you can't question, as the last 2 years, you can't question some things. You can question things, but you can't question some.
It's because science is truth.
If you get my drift, some things. But you can question.
Is that an attempt at a wink?
All things. You can question all things in religion, but you can't believe some things. So it's the same. It's the same thing. And that comes down to humans. I think the problem is the implementation of an absolute form of thinking, where that absolutism form of thinking, that absolutist form of thinking, brings around a dogma which is unquestionable depending on what party you're part of.
This is really just power structure, as we all have said in the past. You roll back a few hundred years, and during the Inquisition period of time, and if you didn't agree with what the religious people said, if you started to say, no, the sun is not revolving around us, string them up, burn them, torture them, do whatever you want, because you're not doing what we say. And at that time, they said religion is truth.
Absolutism.
And now we're going, science is truth.
Yeah, it's the same. It's a cycle. Everything's a circle. I'm a circle. You're a circle. You're a circle. Everything's a circle. What you think is a square is a circle. Triangles are circles.
You know what a circle is. It's just a piece of pie.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Pie's good. Yeah. So, and this is something I do want to talk about.
Greek salad, one or the other.
Greek salad.
And this is what I do want to talk about, as I said in another episode, but I'm going to mention it briefly. So this is saved for another episode, but the dogma associated with Christianity came about in a lot of ways through necessity. Early interpretations of the influence of Christ and his affiliation with God trended into heretical territory early on, which threatened a lot of things about, in specifics, the belief of Christianity. Specifically, they weren't too sure how to understand Jesus' relation to God himself. Was he the Son of God? Was he God reincarnate? Was he a human that was chosen by God? They didn't know how to determine this. So, not to trend too far into that area, because I'm not sure whether an absolutionist form of view of religion was there from the beginning. I don't know whether that was the case. I don't think it was. But this dogma was originally implemented, and it was actually implemented specifically in relation to Christianity, specifically with heavy influence from Emperor Constantine during the councils of Nicaea and Constantinople, both of which dictated the modern church's interpretation of understanding Jesus. That's why they went from saying his son or the son to the begotten son. The actual term is begotten. There's a reason for that, and it's very fascinating. I want to talk about this in another episode, even though it might be too religious for some people. I tend to think that's very fascinating. And I don't necessarily know whether that's good or bad, because I don't know what to think about Constantine. Because he supposedly ruled in the year 1000. Or did he?
Ooh,
we don't know.
Conspiracy theory time.
Is it a conspiracy theory? I tend to think carbon dating is pretty accurate. So, we don't know. Don't know. But it would be interesting to talk about that. And I think that for necessity, for keeping Christianity alive, was something they had to do. Otherwise, the Church of the Church of Christ, or the Way, or postmodernist Judaism, I guess that's heretical. It would have broken into multiple different variances, more so than it has today. One that believed Jesus was God, one that believed Jesus was the Son of God, and one that believed Jesus was all of them, all at once. And it's very, I was reading about this today, it was very fascinating. Now, I technically think that the reason I brought this up is to kind of explain what a dogma is. It's a principle or a statement of ideas, or a group of such principles or statements, especially when considered to be authoritative or accepted uncritically. For many people, the idea of science seems to hold a dogmatic interpretation. Equating science with quote-unquote truth would be a perfect example of dogmatic thinking. Over the last few years, that has been held true in relation to the medical and scientific fields in stark contrast, and ironically enough, the only way to break people from this mold of thought is through actual scientific breakthroughs. The same can be said through religious awakenings, enlightenments, and practical movements. Very similar. So, is science a religion? Do we know? Have we determined yet?
I'm still with my original premise that this is a circular thing. I think the religion brought about questioning. Questioning brought about scientific minds, people that wanted to answer those questions. We call them scientists now. I don't know what we called them way back. Probably monks.
Philosophers.
Monks and philosophers and thought.
Teachers.
All that stuff.
Bishops.
Aristotle. All of those people, in some degree or another, would be scientists today. And so religion pushed questions that were unanswerable into a realm where people started to empirically decide what those answers could be. And when those answers were created after the initial disruption of being controversial to the church, after a period of generations or whatever, when they were finally accepted, church moved its Overton window in a direction further away from what science was. So I think that they're married. That's what I think.
Complementary would be where I align. So I guess we're kind of in the similar realm here. I would like to think that science isn't a religion. And the reason I say that is because if science is a religion, then the very principles of science, just like the very principles of dogmatic religion, depending on what they are, should not be trusted. And I have a problem with that. And the reason I have a problem with that is because a lot of what we discuss always comes back to power. Now, the church didn't want people to learn science because it would have led people to questioning the power of the church and the ultimate power and the authoritarianistic power of the Pope and the King. That's why they didn't want people reading the Bible. That's why they didn't want people learning. Same thing with science. If we start learning things in science that start to disprove the very threads of what we believe to be science, of course, it would make sense that people would get angry and punish you by keeping you inside for 2 years, or like shutting down your business, or I don't know, like canceling your Instagram account and all that stuff. Of course they would, because it's a threat to their power. And I tend to hope that science is not that, just like I tend to hope religion is not that, because if that's the case, both of them end in failure. In order for something to become better, it has to be able to move forward and progress in a positive way, in a logical way. Not in a way that is progress for the sake of progress, but in a way that is progress for the sake of benefit. And if both of them are dogmatic religions, it spells doom for us.
I think you have to always look to who is pulling the strings. That's what you have to do in all of these things.
Or what?
If you look at the religions of the world and the power structures they've created, and when you look at the Catholic Church or the Latter-day Saints, or any number of religions throughout the world, there's a huge amount of power in money and I was going to say spread, but coverage of the world in terms of what goes on, who holds the levers, who moves things in different directions. And it's been that way since the beginning of since Constantine, whatever year he was actually.
Yeah, and before that, depending on who you're talking to, the whatever emperor associated with whatever. I mean, it's always been back to the leading class. Mm-hmm. I think, just for some insight into what, science really deals with, because as I said earlier, I think science tends to explain the how, the what, the when, and religion tends to explain the why. Science, for everyone here in the room and our listeners, tends to deal with the natural and known universe. Things like light, water, fire, landforms, plant life, air, minerals, living beings, energy, unseen forces. Interesting. It attempts to solve similar questions to faith, but at a cellular, microscopic, or universal scale. I mean, it's all of these things are important. The unfortunate part is science tends to trend into religious territory, as we said a second ago, when the said proprietors of science tend to force it in that direction.
Well, I think science in general, if the people that are looking at the groups that are looking at science and saying there's a hard line, religion is not real, are the ones that are saying science will eventually always answer questions that religion says are faith-based, belief-based. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're wrong. Doesn't matter if they're wrong, because there's always going to be a question.
Yeah, like that.
I have one of those. So where does ghost hunting fall on this scale?
Paganism, demonology, Satanism. No, ghost
religion
hunting,
then.
Well, here's the thing: is ghost hunting, the paranormal, would be considered a part of, as if we were to quote, not quote, but to pull from the Book of Baggins, not Frodo, the Zach Baggins, would be a paranormal science. It would be a form of science,
right? But then so there's two sides to that coin specifically.
Well, what's interesting is he refers to. So this is why I thought unseen forces is interesting, right? Because we talk about parallel universes, we talk about multiple existences. Multiple universes in which, if the one-dimensional being, the one emotional being from Star Trek is real, Spock, he would say that there are infinite planets out there with infinite forms of life that are just like us, that we need to go and discover and help, right? If that's all true, if that all tends to be true, and Fermi wasn't right in his question that we are ultimately alone, then who's to suggest that demons aren't from another dimension? Who's to suggest angels aren't? The Bible says they are.
The question Bale had, though, is interesting, because Baggins will say there's demons involved. And there's
ghosts and demons. And there's a differentiation.
Evil spirits. And that is very much on the quote-unquote unscientific side of the ledger.
Supposedly.
And then he'll use a real noisy alarm clock or whatever the hell he uses. If you
Spirit
listen
box.
very close, they said,
Hey,
I was killed by, that's right,
Hey, it's a nerfabular vibrator, okay? It vibrates the molecules all around you.
That's right.
The term is literally spirit box.
It is spirit
I
box,
don't have any idea.
which is
I
the
don't
most
watch that stuff,
scientific
but-
term.
I only
I've heard.
know because I was at his museum.
The thing is that those are very entertaining for those that watch, and that's fine. And he's made an unbelievable career out of it, and he has a certain real or imagined thinking about all that stuff. But it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, Wolf. We don't freaking know.
I don't know shit.
And a lot of people will look at the whole ghost kind of thing and say two things at the same time. Number one, I mentioned it earlier, energy never leaves. It just changes, right? So a lot of people believe that the life force that we have as human beings will continue in different ways. And one of those ways will to leave an impression upon where you were. Mm-hmm. And some people are sensitive to that energetic impression.
Well, then I wonder if someone like, I don't know, what's some famous science? Stephen Hawking would be more willing to believe in something like ghost hunting being a science than some religious zealotry.
Well, here's the thing: is this all comes back to whether it's provable, whether it's a provable, controlled thing that we can like use the scientific method on.
Did they prove that wormholes exist?
Supposedly,
provable?
Supposedly, it is on paper. We've been able to do it
in math.
Yeah,
but have you seen it? Because the Bible's on paper.
Supposedly,
supposedly
they just took their first picture of a black hole.
Yeah, supposedly they did. Yeah,
but she's got a good point.
No, she does,
because you talked about derivations earlier, differentials and things like that. And if you've ever looked at an equation, a differential equation,
I have, unfortunately.
I've looked at way too many in my life. Thank God I don't anymore.
I hate them.
They can get big and long. But at the very end of every single one of them, do you know what there always is?
A headache.
No, there's a fraction. Mm-hmm. And that fraction is dx over dy. You know what that stands for?
Dumb equation over duped youth.
It's talking about that equation is it takes the whole differential equation and says you have to add a time element to it. You can't equate something's deterioration or gain without putting time in there. And if you can't, this goes back to my original supposition that everything we talk about, our view on everything is related to how we advance through what we considered is time. And, religion is not constrained by that at all. Because if you think about the ultimate answer, what I was talking about earlier, there's always a question at the end of science's time working on this problem or question they're answering. This hypothesis they have, this theory they come up with, this empirical data that they do to prove something, this equation. After that, there's still the rest of time, whatever that means, to fill in the blank. And the only way human beings can fill in a blank is to have some sort of belief system to fill it in.
Yeah.
That's what religion is.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a solid point. And I think it makes sense. And I think at the end of the day, I've come to disagree with the statement that knowledge is power. I don't think it is. I think knowledge is freedom. I think power is what I think people who say knowledge and power want you to think that it's power, and thus you get stuck in the cycle of believing what they want you to believe. I think that if people were truly going to spend the time, like we talked about in the Enlightenment episode, actually thinking of things and taking time to contemplate, they would find that the things that they bicker and argue about and the things that are meant to be at war are merely there to drive attention away from the actual problem.
You know what you just said, though? Knowledge is a tool. That's what
I told you. I agreed with what you said.
I'm just reinforcing it.
You're rubbing it in my face.
You say you agree with me. I've got to bring it up 2 or 3 times at least.
This is what we call a sad man's way of getting one over. I already gave you. I gave you what you wanted.
Yes.
And here you are, just dangling it.
Just want to hear it again.
I'm not a horse. I'm a wolf. Okay. You don't need to dangle the carrot. You don't need to dangle a carrot in front of my face.
I usually dangle a rabbit.
That's weird. That's strange. Well,
Or a sheep, apparently.
So the premise that I take still, I don't think that science, that was good. I don't think that science is meant to be a religion. I think that it has become, in a lot of ways, a religion. And the dictates of science are not inherently religious, in my opinion. But I think they're forcefully pushed in a direction to make them religious and thus easily controlled by the people at the top. And by people, I mean literally anybody who has any influence. I mean, if you want, I mean, look at Mr. Mr. Owner of Microsoft. Okay, yeah. If you want to have a lot of influence, all you got to do is rub elbows with pedophiles. So if he figured it out, then people who have run the institutions for years and years and decades have figured out that the best way to do things is to preface and phrase and frame something in such a way that pushes an image that everyone else interprets that is incorrect, as opposed to what the actual truth is. And I think that's what happens with science and religion. I think the unfortunate part is both of them should know better. Both of them. I think religious individuals should know that science is not evil, and I think scientific individuals should know that religion is not stupid. I think that the games that they fall into, which are very human, are unfortunate, and they don't need to exist. They really don't. And frankly, there are a lot of contradictions that we'll run over quite briefly, because we're getting towards the end of the episode, that I think paint an accurate picture for people who are on either end of the spectrum. For those within the scientific community, you say that religion is contradictory. Dare I say so is science. Apparently multiple universes beyond our own, some of which are parallel, in which the different choices a different version of yourself has made are coming to fruition, which sounds like reincarnation to me, actually exists within science. Wormholes, in which we can potentially travel virtually instantaneously from point A to point B, actually exists in science. Electrons spinning around an atomic nucleus are moving so fast that they are never in any given spot in their energy level. Instead, they occupy all places at that level, effectively making an electron shell and not an orbit. Interestingly contradictory. We also learned that when stimulated by a photon beam, as we discussed with quantum superposition, electrons can jump from one energy level to another without moving through the space between those levels. Light is made up of photons, which are comprised of waves and particles at the same time. The universe is expanding, but it isn't expanding into anything. There's no center to its expanding, nor is there an edge to expand into anything. So it's supposedly not infinite either. So that's a big contradictory question as well. Euclidean geometry tells us that parallel lines will never intersect. Non-Euclidean geometry says perhaps they do. Einstein's theory of general relativity says that what we call motion is really just the curvature of space based on gravitational pull. All of those things are really contradictory. Does not mean that they're wrong. Does not mean that they're absolutely right. Just means that they're contradictory. And same thing with religion. Jesus Christ has fully human and fully divine, two natures in one person. That's contradictory. The crucifixion and the resurrection with its promise of eternal life. Interestingly contradictory. God is simultaneously, yet distinctly, Father, Son, Spirit, ever three and ever one. Not one God wearing three different masks, not three separate deities, but one in three and three in one. All of this is contradictory, which again gets me back to my overall and our overall premise. Okay. That's it. It's all contradictory. And here's the thing. Science will say, well, yeah, but those things can change. Those are all provable. Yeah, they are all provable, but they also can all be disprovable. All of them. Every single one of them. Same thing with religion.
It's so funny because we've talked about this before as well. As what we call time moves forward into the reality that we view, right? Things get more complex. Even as answers get discovered on big subjects or little subjects, all it does is create additional questions.
Yeah. And additional answers.
And I think that's genuinely amazing. I really do. Because it tells us what the possibilities for human beings and their understanding truly is. It's nearly infinite. Nearly, yeah. And that is the thing that I don't understand. You don't have to be contradictory. You don't have to hate science if you're religious. You don't have to hate religion if you're scientific. To me, they are overlapping entities, always and forever.
Yeah. And, interesting note of people who think that religion can't be impacted by science or by changes, it can be. religion, just like science, can be impacted and it can change. Look at the Mormon Church in the 70s. They changed a few important things, okay? And if they can change a few important things, then so can we, darn it. Criticism should be welcomed. And the church should be welcomed in science. It is welcomed, supposedly, in science. And science and religion, in their purest, unadulterated forms, they're not meant to be dogmatic. Unless, of course, your entire religion would fall apart if the one principle of your religion is contradictory, in which then it is a necessity. And there's a whole other argument that we can dive into with that, which I want to. It would be a very interesting topic. But at the end of the day, outside of dogmas, the importance of all of this is falsifiability. The principle, which revolves around the inability to imagine an experiment or an idea that refutes or discredits a specific scientific hypothesis, theory, or principle, is predicated on the very fact that we should at all times be cognizant of alternatives. For those that say they've lost hope in finding any semblance of a creator or the supernatural after applying the scientific method and finding no evidence, did you do the same with the premise of dark matter? How about planets revolving around the sun and not the sun revolving around the earth? How about the Hadron Collider? Did you do all that? You might have. You might have done it before everyone else has done it. Maybe you were one of the first, and hopefully you were, because that's fantastic. I almost said that's fanatical, and it kind of is fanatically fantastic. I'm not suggesting to immediately join a religion, nor am I suggesting that science is absolute. I'm just pointing out an argument of convenience, since we are all arguably incredibly lucky to be alive at a time in which dark matter, black holes, and parallel universes are not just ideas, but actual schools of accepted thought. I'm just pointing out that an argument of convenience is not always scientific. The world is a better place when we don't hold absolutist views in objection to healthy criticism. The truth is, we know very little, and the more we accept that as true, the better off we will be.
Interestingly, I'll just add a thought to this, is that a lot of these dogmatic battles are usually disrupted through the history of civilization by, tremendously volatile matters. And I'm not talking about the last couple of years. I'm talking about redefinition of who we are based on some outward intrusion of something unforeseen.
Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly. Godzilla. Pacific Rim, all those beasts.
I want that to happen so bad. And it'd be terrible, and we'd probably...
I think I'm going more in the direction of something just in front of us, not just a UFO coming or whatever, UAFs or whatever the hell they're UAPs they're called now. Something that changes our overall philosophical way of viewing ourselves. As much as we say scientifically we're not the center of the universe anymore, we're still human beings, and we like to think of ourselves as the center of it. That's why we talked about last time being the main character in our story. And when we come to realize that our story is just a little story within the context of a much, much greater, bigger story, we, I think, change our viewpoint. Yep. We understand things are a lot more complicated than we'd like to think.
Yeah. Just like changing the name from UFO, unidentified flying object, to UAP, United Aerial Penises, has changed things dramatically in the scientific... Unidentified aerial
penises phenomenon.
You don't need to rain on my parade, okay? With that being said,
that like
Jamie...
kind of a...
I was an ending, and you pooped, you dripped on my parade.
A giant UAP dripped on your parade?
It did.
I thought you were looking at me and telling me to get the definition.
Well, you jumped the gun. You're fired. So all I have to say, just kidding, you're hired. All I have to say is, you couldn't have said it better, because this is, we're never going to know. We won't know in our lifetimes. We're not going to know in your lifetime or the lifetimes of your lifetimes past you or before you or in front of you or any other lifetime.
It does depend, because
I don't think we will.
There are some things out there that talk about how we can live for nearly ever.
Dear God, I hope not.
Maybe we should talk about that in an upcoming episode.
We've got 5 different... I'm going to have to re-listen to this whole thing, as I usually do, and I'm going to have to say, okay, well, that's one, that's one, that's one, that's one. Maybe not that one. That one's good. Like, I'm going to have to... So many options. But yeah, I don't know, any other poignant points to make? Any thoughts outside of unified aerial penises that we can tie onto?
Well, just think about when you're walking down the street, you see a million faces, million, thousand, hundred, maybe.
A million, thousand, hundred. That's a lot of faces.
And what you were talking about with the main character energy thing. Well, think about it. So you see those faces.
Anthropocentrism.
Most of them you'll likely never see them again, and you'll likely never think of them again. And they'll see the same thing when they're looking at you.
You're not that cool, bro. Anyway, that wraps up our episode. We hope this episode gave some food for thought, as we hope all of our episodes do, but specifically this one. Thanks for tuning in. And if you liked what you heard, if you liked what you see, if you like the people involved, just remember we are a holistically created podcast. We are sourced from the greatest coffee beans in all of South America, specifically in the very deep jungles of the Amazon. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up and a subscription if you feel generous. It is absolutely free to you. And yeah, we have episodes that come out every single week. So we will chat with you soon.
Bye.